Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am back with Ibn al-Warraq. Uh, we're going to be talking about the expansion of Islam and whether the myth of peaceful expansion really is borne out by the history. And also, we're going to, as time allows, look at some of the questions that arose from our previous talk. So, we're going to tackle the expansion question from a number of perspectives. Ibn al-Warraq will explain to us, and then we'll try and tackle some of these questions. I can only go for a maximum of 90 minutes today because I have another stream with Adam Seeker on his channel in 2 hours. So I need to get ready for that and grab something to eat in the meanwhile. So Ibn al-Warraq, very welcome. Good to see you again.
Thank you for having me, and good to be here again.
Yeah, no, great to have you back. So tell us about what we are going to talk about today.
What we're going to talk about today, because we're talking early, me and you, about the expansion of Islam early on, and the doctrine of violence in Islam. So I might have a little bit different perspective, because I believe personally that expansion of Islam has very little to do with its actual content, with the religious aspect, but more with the historical background. Let me explain that. I have to go a few hundred years before sharing screen. During the time of Muhammad, just by the end of his life,
you're not sharing your screen yet. There's nothing.
I am. Yes, I'm during that time, the expansion of that's the expansion of the Arabic language. This is how Arabic language looked and where it was speaking. The earliest at the edges, it's with a small percentage of people who speak Arabic. The large area in the Arabian Peninsula, those who are Arabic speaker. So note that the majority of the land that was initially taken over by Islam didn't speak any Arabic at all. The other thing is, there is a hadith, I shared it with you early, when Muhammad was saying to Muslims that they are not allowed to take the Quran with them into a non-Muslim country. This one.
Okay, so it says, Ibn Umar said that God's messenger forbade taking the Quran into enemy territory. Muslim says, do not take the Quran with you when traveling, for I cannot guarantee that the enemy will not get it. That's Bukhari and Muslim.
Yes.
And it should be noted that, as you said, these are double Sahih, basically. And also,
the Muslim terminology they use for that's called agreed upon, means agreed upon by Bukhari and Muslim. It's the most authentic hadith in Islam. Some people, some Muslim scholar says anyone who deny an agreed upon hadith is not a Muslim. So that's as authentic as it gets.
Yeah, Muslims will still dispute it anyway. And I should note, just for the audience, that basically all Islamic text, even a text that has a little bit of the Quran that quotes something, that is off limits to non-Muslims. We're not allowed to read it. So technically, Islam is a secret unless you're a Muslim.
So this is the thing, because how come that's one, they are not Arabic-speaking countries, and two, that Muslims are not allowed to take Quran? Islam expanded that fast in that time. There is one thing to note, that's the speed of expansion of Islam is not actually unique to Islam. Alexander the Great ruled half the earth in 11 years. Napoleon ruled over the entire continental Europe in 11 years. The Roman Empire was in 117 years, ruled most of Europe or most of South of Europe, Middle East. So the speed of expansion wasn't has anything to do with the religion. It happened before, it was repeated after. Hitler ruled over most of Europe.
Note, the Thunderous has just asked, and this is a very good question. How could Muhammad say, do not take the Quran with you, if the Quran was not yet in written form?
Whatever was written at the time, don't take the leaflet where the Quran. Don't take any part of it with you.
Okay.
So to understand how it expanded, sometimes we do what it's called historian's fallacy, because you look at history based on the information we have today, not based on the information it was available then. Information available then, you have to go back to 439, there was a volcanic winter that basically took the entire Mediterranean into darkness for a couple of years. It started a wave of famine, and by 540 they will start what's called the Justinian plague. The Justinian plague was extremely interesting phenomena because it resulted in Constantinople losing about 40% of its population in 2 years. And it kept coming. Let me show you this. It kept coming from 640 until 750 in different form every few years. Okay, here's the map.
All right.
Look at this section here. You see the dates on it, where it's when it hit Syria, when it hit Mesopotamia. 561, 573, 592. These are the times where we have contemporaneous document about the wave of plagues. And it kept coming over and over. The same thing in Egypt. 573, 572. By the time Islam came, the Justinian plague basically wiped out 25 to 30% of humanity, as known at that time. But it affected more the coastal cities, not the inland, because it was traveling. The travel of it was going through coastal city mostly, because it was traveling by boats, there is a very interesting book. Okay, I'll come to that later. There's a couple of interesting books where they show the expansion of the plague itself. So it went all around the ports in the Mediterranean, but Arabia was kind of saved from that because it's more inland. It will take the lifetime of the virus. It would Y pestis about 2 weeks. By the time it gets inland, it died out.
Okay.
So by the time the end of 7th century, when Islam started to conquer the Roman Empire, the Sassanid Empire was ended because of the plague. The Romans were weakened because of their fight with the Persian, and both the Roman and the Persian were affected by several waves of the plague. And basically, Islam came to an absolutely devastated Byzantine Empire.
So that's why it spread more easily, because at the time there was all of this devastation.
Because losing 25% of your population, you lost 25% of your army, 25% of the taxes, you have several famine, and so on and so on. During that time, there was some attacks and chaos within the Byzantine Empire, an attack from the north. So they choose to abandon North Africa to protect their northern flank. So when Arab armies came, there were in some places, there were basically no army to defend it.
Okay.
Because the speed of the expansion is coupled with the Arab army aggression and the Byzantine army weakness.
Okay, that's an interesting perspective, that one that I have not heard discussed before.
Because you would have to go back like a couple of 100 years before it, and again we ignore. Sometimes you ignore what happened about it. There is several interesting books about it. Anybody would want to read more about it? Where is? I need to learn how to share a screen at some point.
Okay, the full screen, and then
Yeah.
just put everything on the second screen.
This one, it's called the Justinian Flea. It's the plague of the Roman Empire, and effective from 540 to 750, and its expansion throughout the Roman Empire. or Byzantine Empire, Eastern Roman Empire.
Okay, interesting.
Okay, ask away.
Oh, no. This is just a new aspect of history I was not aware of, that there was this plague that actually devastated populations and made it easy for them to
It
conquer.
was historically, it actually was one of the, or if not, it's the first known plague to us, first recorded plague. We, and it had the most devastation in the Mediterranean in general.
Okay, it says here that it's the same bacterium responsible for the Black Death, which was from 1346 to 1353.
Yes, but it was a little bit before that. There is a second book with again that's a study for in pandemic and history of disease. It's called the Catastrophe, and it shows the map. You see the map, how it expanded. It basically avoided Arabia, and it went through the Byzantine Empire as far as Ireland, and through the Persian Empire. So by the time Islam came, this area was absolutely devastated.
Okay.
One. Two, you have in places like in Egypt, Egyptian Copts were at the time were known as Monophysites. So they were not in good terms with the Romans. So some of them in the beginning sided with the Muslim invasion because they're going to protect us from the Romans, and the Byzantine army withdrew from Egypt. By about 640, they tried again to reconquer Egypt, but the Byzantine army failed to conquer Egypt, even though they reached very near Fustat, very near the center of Delta. But they withdrew from Alexandria, they withdrew back, and Muslim basically put the dominance over the entirety of Egypt. And as at the time, it was the breadbasket of the ancient time, it guaranteed for them ongoing supply for the Arab army going to the rest of North Africa and as far as Spain. Until 732, there were nothing stopping Islam. Not because of religion, it's because of conquest. Until you get Charles Martel.
Right. Yeah, the Battle of Tours.
Yeah, because without Charles Martel, there's one saying by Tariq ibn Ziyad, one of the Muslim leaders of the army, and it says allegedly he stopped at the shore of the Atlantic Ocean. He said, "Oh Allah, if I know there is a land behind this ocean or behind this water to conquer your name, I would have ridden to it." So the only thing that probably saved the Americas is Muslims didn't know it existed. So
Okay, very interesting. So they were very much intent on conquering everything.
because Muhammad, during his lifetime, has said, again, the authenticity of hadith can be debated, that Allah has bended the earth to him and he saw the east and the west, and my people rule will reach as far as I've seen. So it's not a matter for Muslim if they're going to have global dominance or not. It's the goal. This is the aim because this is a doctrine of faith for them. Until today, I don't know about English language, I haven't read the writing. In Arabic literature, Muslims still talk about the day they will conquer Rome, because they asked Muhammad once, are we going to conquer Rome first or Constantinople? He said Constantinople first, which implies Rome next. So they still, till today, they want to take over Rome.
So for instance, if you go back to 1683, the Battle of Vienna, the intention was to take Vienna and then go to Rome, and they said they were going to stable their horses in the basilicas there.
Yeah, and we'll get to the battle of roughly or shortly, Battle of Vienna. So
Yeah.
that
Can I just add
was
something? I just want to add something from a Muslim historian, Ibn Khaldun, the man who invented modern history. So he's said to have invented sociology from Muqaddimah.
anthropology.
Yeah, exactly. So he writes, this is supposed to be Islam's greatest historian. He was a very highly qualified imam. And he says, in the Muslim community, holy war or jihad is a religious duty. And there's the universalism of the Muslim mission with the obligation to convert everybody to Islam, either by persuasion or by force. So that's dawah or by force. Caliphate and royal authority are united in Islam. So military, legal, and as well, basically all authorities united. It's a theocracy. There's no separation of church and state. The other religious groups did not have a universal mission. Holy war was not a religious duty to them except for defense. And it says that we are not under obligation to gain power over other nations, as is the case with Islam. And then it goes on to say, the Islamic war by sea says non-Arab nations became the servants, quote unquote. Wouldn't you like to be a servant of the Muslims, of the Arabs, and were under their control? And the Arabs wished to wage the holy war by sea. They embarked the army and fighters to fight against the unbelievers across the sea. And he was desirous of waging the holy war. And from there, the conquest of Sicily was achieved. So, yeah, I mean, this is the Muslims admit to it. Of course, today they'll say, no, 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 no.
This is actually a very, very good segue to the next point where we're talking about that's violent within Islam, because in almost every belief system, every religion, every ideology, there is an element of violence, including armies and police. There is an element of violence. So violence itself per se isn't always wrong, except in Jainism as the most pacifist and peaceful religion. Even in Jainism, they allow self-defense in certain circumstances. But the idea of violence in Islam has a very different methodology, very different goal, and very different termination point. Muhammad, when he says, I was sent by the sword preceding Judgment Day, and my livelihood was put in the shadow of my spear. So it's the war for him is that's my livelihood. He put a curse in Muslim. He said that if the day come, they prefer agriculture and manufacturing, that Allah will put a curse on them, wouldn't be lifted until they pursue jihad. The goal of war in Islam is precisely that other people are not Muslims. It's not defensive. It's not even offensive. It's the fact that they don't believe in the same thing we do. That's the goal. And
Yes.
as long as they are perceived, some people who don't believe the same thing you do, that's a good reason for war. Even if the whole area has become Muslims, like quite often people who talk about the Islamic Empire, there is no such thing as Islamic Empire. There are about 19 of them. And certain point, one of the Islamic Empire thought the other one is not Muslim enough, and they waged war against each other. It's starting with Ali and Aisha and the Battle of Camel, you know about it, or the Abbasi and Umayyadan, or the Salah ad-Din and the Egyptian, or the Ottoman and the Egyptian. So it's not as long as they find out someone is not a Muslim, even if the other person or the other country are Muslims, but not at Muslim enough, not a Muslim by our definition. That's a reason enough for war. The termination point for it is absolute domination on a global scale. So that's the two main difference between Islamic doctrine of violence and any other religion, any other belief system. Its starting point is different. I fight you not because you fight me, but because you don't believe exactly what I believe in. And I'm not going to stop until either you submit or die, or join or die.
Yeah, that is clarified in the Sharia. That actually, let me just do this. Just bring this up. The apostles said, "Fight in the name of Allah and in the path of Allah, and fight those who disbelieve in Allah." I mean, that's from the Hidayah. That's the major. This is the primary Sharia source or fiqh source in the Hanafi school.
And it's
Now,
also in the Quran, Surah 9, verse 29.
yeah, agreed.
By,
Yeah, I just don't focus very much, but it says here, but through the invitation, they come to know that we engage them in battle on account of our religion, and maybe they will respond positively so that battle is avoided. So this is what they say, that we fight them because of our religion. The religion requires it. And there's other sources, other places I can go to, not now, but where it says that they would rather that we fight them because of our religion, and for the sake of avoiding being killed, they will rather just convert to Islam. So the reason is that they do this specifically because Islam requires it, and they need to turn everyone Muslim by threat or by persuasion. See, the unbelievers
and
must be fought until they accept Islam, and that's within Shafi's original Risala.
And that's also referencing what Muhammad says, that this deen, this religion, Islam, would enter every house by hook or crook. So whichever way, not by persuasion, but by violent if need be.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing, if you did study the history of Islam, if you notice the current Muslim argument, no, we only fought them because they stopped us from proclaiming and calling da'wah for Islam, that actually never happened. Muslim didn't send delegation to call people for Islam to Egypt or to the Levant or to Iraq. They sent letter to the ruler, submit, or we're coming to you. It's not believe in what we say, it's submit and pay the jizya, or we're coming for you.
Yeah, one issue though is that Muslims are very good at denial. They will simply deny all of this. They'll say, no, that was only that verse was actually only revealed for the 3rd of July, 721. It was meant specifically for that date, for 18 minutes, and actually it's not valid after that. Or no, actually it's just misrepresented, or no, that is only in the context of if you're attacked by Martians, just in case Mars ever attacks. They'll make up a bunch of stories and they'll deny every single source they have to the contrary. So and they'll change the subject. They'll dive and they'll dance, and so yeah. But I guess we can only inform our people as opposed to necessarily changing the minds of the believers.
Quite funny. Actually, I don't know if you're doing it intentionally or just happen. Is you're moving the topic quite smoothly because you just got to a second point. It's like it's not valid until that. During the time of George Washington presidency, the North Africans started actually kidnap American citizens. Little bit of background. Started 16th century. The Ottoman Empire used North African vassal states called the Barbary coast. They used them as what they called naval jihad in Islam, by which they raided Europe as far as Iceland. They raided places like they raided as far as Iceland. There is an absolutely interesting book called The Stolen Village, where the Muslim pirates in 1631, they went as far as to Cook County in Ireland and took an entire village of Baltimore and taken them back to Algeria, sold them into slavery.
They kidnapped like 120 people. Yeah.
It's 100% of the village population. The number just came to 100 because there were no one else left in the village. There is a book written in 1627 by, what was his name? Difficult to pronounce this guy's name.
Als Marie Grensen and Adam Nichols. Grensen.
Yeah, his Icelandic priest. The entire village was taken to Algeria and sold into slavery, and that's his diary written at the time, trying to recover his taken wife and children. He didn't get them back, but he was released about 9 years later.
Wow.
Once America declared independence from Britain, so America became fair game for Algerian and North African pirates because it's
Right.
no longer under the protection of the British Empire.
Right.
So they start actually attacking and kidnapping American citizens and taking them to be sold in slavery. Men, women, children, black and white, sell them in slavery in Algeria. At
Can I
that
read a
time,
section on that from the John Adams and Thomas Jefferson? Can I just do a section on that?
that's exactly what I was going to share. It's a part from a letter. Adams and Jefferson both, they were in London to meet with Abdurrahman, the governor, the ambassador of Algeria, to which Jefferson was saying, okay, why you're attacking us? We're a friendly nation. We have no war against anybody. At the time, the Continental Army were disbanded and America didn't have an overseas presence at all. It was a couple of decades old. And to which Abdurrahman, the ambassador, says, because it's written in our Quran, you're not Muslims, and because you're not Muslim, we have to attack you, enslave you, or kill you if we can.
Can I read this section? Because I've got these notes here.
Yeah.
It says Adams and Jefferson, 1786, went to London to meet the ambassador from Tripoli, that's Libya, Sidi Haji Abdurrahman, about the seizure of American ships. They were kidnapping American ships. They were destroying them, or they were ransoming them back, or they were taking the people as slaves. So they wrote back to John Jay. We took the liberty to make inquiries concerning the reasons of their pretensions to make war upon a nation who had done them no injury, and said we considered all mankind as our friends who had done us no wrong, nor given us any provocation. The ambassador answered, it was founded on the laws of the Prophet. It is written in our Quran, all nations who do not acknowledge their authority were sinners. So no one who doesn't acknowledge the Prophet or the Quran, that's Muhammad, it is our right as Muslims and our duty to make war upon them wherever they can be found, and to make slaves of all they could take as prisoners, and that every Muslim who would be slain in battle was sure to go to paradise. And this went on for the next 30 years. John Quincy Adams then writes in his essay on the Turks, in the 7th century of the Christian era, a wandering Arab of the lineage of Hagar the Egyptian, combining the powers of transcendent genius with the preternatural energy of a fanatic and the fraudulent spirit of an impostor, proclaimed himself as a messenger from heaven. He spread desolation and delusion over an extensive portion of the earth. Adopting from the Mosaic law the doctrine of one omnipotent God, he connected with it and the audacious falsehood that he himself was prophet and apostle. I'll pause there for the moment. I mean, this is pretty hard hitting what he says here.
But at the time when George Washington and after him Adam was a friend of mine called it the first war in terror, which is basically what it was. Adams chose to pay the bribery, pay the tribute to Algeria, Tripoli, and the rest. It reached about 20% of the annual budget of the U.S. government paid in tribute.
Wow, wow.
Yeah, 20%. Of the whole country's budget. At the same time, the south coast of Europe, Spain and Italy, was specifically devastated. The entire south coast of Europe was depopulated because any village or island close to the coast, the people get kidnapped and taken into slavery into North Africa. During those 250, 300 years, between 1.2 and 1.5 million European were taken into slavery to North Africa.
Yeah, that number, oddly enough, is about 5 times more than the number of slaves that went to North America.
You're just no that number is actually quite low, because this is the number of the European taken into slavery in North Africa. There is another one, the Crimean slave trade. There is 2.5 million more taken from Europe
Yeah, the number
by the
reaches at
Ottoman
least 5
Empire.
million. Yeah.
So the number, and if you want to add those who were taken from Africa, that's a whole different story. But Netherlands, Spain, France, Iceland, Sweden, everybody was bearing tribute to the Dey of Algiers, the Pasha of Algiers, and there were any treaty they have with him, if he changes his mind or if he needs more money, the treaty is cancelled. And so from one side, without the American, Algeria declared war in America, because you're not ransoming your people fast enough, you're not giving us enough money.
Right. Let me just finish this section because people might find
Go on.
this interesting. He goes on, John Adams writes again. He writes, adopting from the new revelation, the gospel of Jesus, the faith and hope of immortal life and of future retribution, he humbled it to the dust by adapting all the rewards and sanctions of his religion to the gratification of the sexual passion. He poisoned the sources of human truth at the fountain by degrading the condition of the female sex and the allowance of polygamy, and he declared undistinguishing and exterminating war as a part of his religion against all the rest of mankind. The essence of his doctrine was violence and lust, to exalt the brutal over the spiritual part of human nature. I'll pause with that.
There is a very interesting book about it called Christian Slave Muslim Masters. It's about European slaves in North Africa. You have, to the extent you have one Roman Catholic order, it's called the Trinitarian. The entire order existence was to raise money to ransom Roman Catholic who were taken into North Africa, and sometimes the monks would leave themselves into slavery in order to ransom one of the victims. And it was going on for 250 years. What put an end to it in 1801 was what's called the First Barbary War, when Jefferson won the presidency in 1800, and he decided to do what Trump did, not what Biden did. I'm not going to pay tribute. I'm not going to capitulate. And he reinstated the U.S. Navy. That's why you have in the Marine hymn to the from the hordes of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli, because Tripoli was the first international war, and America was not interested actually to go in war with the Middle East. They just leave us alone. We'd like to trade with you. America was literally dragged into war because if you just want to trade with us, we'd like to enslave you because that's our right and our duty.
So by implication, the only reason the Muslims are not doing this is because they don't have the power to do so. ISIS did it because they could. There was no one to oppose them until they were stopped.
Until today, slavery in Muslim country is illegal, not haram. There is a difference between the two.
It's only illegal because of Western pressure against it.
That's what makes it illegal, because you can make something illegal. It's illegal in most Muslim country to go on and kill someone who's not a Muslim. It's illegal, but it's not haram. That's two different things. So if opportunity arise, like it happened with ISIS in Mosul or with the Yazidi, they will open the slave market again. There is a British ambassador to Sudan who is known by the name of China Jordan. In 1895 or 1885, he tried to close the slave market in Khartoum in Sudan. He was murdered for it. What do you mean closing the slave market? And that's, just
Yes, there's a story. There's yes, you just reminded me of another one. Yeah, someone who tried to become a crusader against slavery in Islam, and they get killed for their trouble. Yes.
That was probably China Gordon, the British ambassador to Khartoum.
No, there was a Muslim I know that I think it was a Yemeni that fought against this and died for his trouble. There's yeah, you can find them in Libya. You'll find them in Liberia. In various African countries. There's more slavery today than there ever has been in the world.
It was made illegal in Mauritania in 2005.
Yes, in fact,
but
yeah,
it's still practiced.
Yeah, and in the Gulf, it was. I mean, slavery was only abolished in the 60s and the 80s in the Gulf.
I have friends of mine born in Saudi in '64. They were born slaves because slavery was still active in Saudi until 1964.
But then you have the hypocrisy. They turn around and say, "Oh, you white people, you are slave owners. You guys abolished slavery 200 years ago. Muslims practicing slavery today."
They will turn around to you and say, "Oh, but our slavery was different."
Yes, I was about to say that. Yes, we were superior. We treat our slaves nicely.
Yes, it's our slavery was different. That's a different story.
How do you get away with that? Because I know it's not legal for a Muslim to criticize Islam or to criticize the Sunnah or Muhammad.
He's not criticizing it because the part you've just read by Ambassador Abdulrahman, it's their right and it's their duty to enslave you. As a Christian, you don't have the right to enslave anybody because everybody's created in God's image, so you don't have that right, even though it existed.
That idea goes back to the 4th century by a Christian. There was a Christian monk who wrote about that, a church father. I can't remember his name offhand, but he wrote about that in the 4th century, that slavery is
that
immoral.
Will be Yohanna the Habi al-Fam, John the Golden Mouth, Christensen.
Not him, not Chrysostom. Before Chrysostom, there's someone who came before him, Chrysostom. Before him in the 4th century, there was someone who wrote about that.
Even in America, that's the problem in America they have in the British colony is the idea of having slaves was basically because moral dilemma for them. You cannot enslave anybody. But back to Jefferson. So Jefferson, what he did, he sent 6 American freighter to free American sailors and American citizens who were being taken to slavery into Algeria. Morocco signed a peace treaty with America before that and forced the Algerian to actually sign a peace treaty. That was the first Barbary War. America got busy with the War of 1812. So Algeria reinstated its aggression against America with the Barbary War again.
On this point that you just mentioned, there's an entire genre of paintings from that era. I'm just showing a few of these paintings.
The slave market?
Of the slave markets of white slaves. There's an entire genre. There's hundreds of these paintings that were made at the time because this was what was commonly happening in the Middle East. That white people, and notice here, they're all naked.
And there is an entire genre of books in the same topic about the North African ruler concubines, European and Dutch and English concubines who were taken as a wife or as a slave, sex slave of the day, or the Pasha of Tripoli or Tunisia or whichever area.
So this is recorded in history, but for some reason people don't want to talk about it. But you will find, image after image after image of.
I personally actually don't know why there isn't anything done dramatically about this because, like, here's a fun fact. Captain Jack Sparrow?
Yeah.
It's actually a historical figure. He was called John Ward, a Dutch converted to Islam, was an enslaver in North Africa. And he was he was called Jack, and he had a tattoo of a sparrow on his arm. So he was shortly by a lot of people called Jack Sparrow. He was called the King of the Mediterranean at some point. But if you did it about actual Jack Sparrow, then you will talk about Muslim enslavement of European in North Africa. And we don't want that because that's politically incorrect, and that doesn't put America and the West as the only people who practice slavery in the universe. But it will put it back in actual history. So it was fictionalized to Pirates of the Caribbean, but the actual character exists.
Right. Okay.
Anyway, so War of 1812 finished. The ruler of Algeria reneged in the treaty, and he actually started again kidnapping American sailors and American merchants and enslaving them and asking for ransom. So that was the second Barbary War, 1815, I believe, where America sent the Marines again and they bombarded Algeria and they forced the Algerian to actually have a treaty. It only ended by 1830 when France found the only way to stop the slave trade in North Africa is to actually occupy North Africa. So the French occupation of Algeria wasn't done for purely colonialist, imperialistic reasons. It's
Okay.
because North African didn't stop for 250 years from kidnapping French sailor and French citizen and British and every European they can put their hand on. And it stopped after the occupation of Algeria.
Okay, and now Muslims will claim, well, because the French invaded us in Algeria, we are now invading, France, and therefore we're
Yeah,
taking over because it's retribution for their colonialist ambitions.
that is the point you mentioned early. Before the colonialist ambition, the first colonialist endeavor to any European was something around 1490 or 1498. The British, when they discovered the good cove route around Africa. But long before that, you had the Ottoman invasion of Hungary. Of Austria. They got to the gates of Vienna several times. Islamic empires, each and every one of them, they actually never stopped trying to invade Europe unless they were stopped. The Ottoman didn't stop trying to occupy Vienna until they were defeated. So
Mhm.
if you have the illusion of today, leave them alone, they will leave us alone. That's not going to
Now,
happen because it's their duty to actually attack you.
I mean, John Quincy Adams writes here further that he speaks of the precept of the Quran is perpetual war against all who deny that Muhammad is the prophet of God.
And
And
that's the first step. The second step, or he deny Islam in a specific flavor. Shia and Sunnah were going to kill each other.
yeah, the command to propagate the Muslim creed by the sword is always obligatory when it can be made effective. Today in Germany, a unknown individual took a car, drove through a crowd, killed at least one that is known, and severed a limb. Drove someone that they lost a limb. It was lying in the street apparently. And now I don't want to speculate. I mean, it could be a Buddhist. We need to be equal opportunity terrorists
Yeah,
here.
I don't recall Buddhists shouting Allahu Akbar. Sorry.
It just means God is great. I mean, it's not a war cry. It's something to do in mosque every day. Because okay, so let's see. You have Islamists and you have Muslims. What's the difference between them? Let's clarify. Islamists
Okay,
believe in the Quran. Muslims believe in the Quran.
okay.
Islamists,
Let me clarify this way.
yeah,
I'll leave Islam alone for a second. In
yeah,
1920s in America, the most people who actually donated for the church were Chicago mafia. So how much of a committed Christian were the Chicago mafia? Al Capone wasn't a committed Christian as
extremely,
far as I know.
obviously.
Okay, but so the point I'm trying to make, the difference between Islamist and Muslim is one of them is more committed to the
There
belief
is no,
system.
look, I mean, it's a joke. I was actually telling a joke. It was actually not meant to be serious because
Okay,
I absolutely despise the word Islamist.
I
It's as
I have
fake
I
as
have
Islamophobia.
Asperger. I take me time to understand jokes.
Sorry.
So
No, because I was
it's
going
okay.
to say that Islamists believe in the Quran, Muslims believe in the Quran. So that's a very big difference already. Islamists pray 5 times a day, Muslims pray 5 times a day.
I know some
Islamists say
Muslim. I
Allahu
know
Akbar,
I,
Muslims say Allahu Akbar. So you can see they're completely
yeah,
different religions. They're not even
I
the same.
I have a friend of mine who's a Muslim Turk. He doesn't pray. He drink like a fish. He never fasts, and but he does two things.
Hmm.
He never eats pork, and his dog never eat pork. and he believed that Islam should rule the world, even though that he does absolutely nothing of Islam. It's the idea of supremacy. It's enshrined in the Quran. The idea that you are the best nation that ever been given to mankind.
Yeah.
That's enshrined in the Quran.
Yeah, but then we make these fake, invented, artificial terms like Islamism. It's like, show me that in the Quran. What Quran do Islamists use? Which is their Quran? Can someone give me a copy of that one?
That's a political correct reasoning, because one of the problem Western thinkers do, by the way, they do that with Islam and with the Jews as well. They think of those religions or of those culture in Western term. The idea of Islam as a religion is a Western Christian Western idea. For Muslim, Islam is a way of life from the day you're born to the day you die. It encompasses every single part of your life: what you eat, how you wipe your bottom, everything. So there is no such thing as we have the religion and the state. The idea of separation of religion and the state, that concept doesn't exist in any Muslim mind. The religion is the state, and the state is the religion.
Right. It's theocracy, theocratic.
Theocratic would be an understatement, because a theocratic system would rule with a divine right, but it actually doesn't rule your everyday life. It's just the laws and the state. But within Islam, it rules your every living breath. It's a little bit even more extreme than theocratic.
Actually, I just want to show everyone something.
Go on.
There was something you said earlier.
I'm trying to wind down because you have to leave.
Oh, we still have time, I believe. Yeah, we still have time. I just want to show everyone this. So, for instance, you spoke of the violence within Islam. This is some of the Sharia here. Now, this is some of the rulings. If a man looks at you without permission, and you threw a rock at him and you knocked out his eye, you would not have committed any offense.
There is a little bit wrong translation. It's not look at you, it's look through your house.
Yes, but the second one goes, whoever peeps into a house without its people's leave, they may put out his eye. Now, it doesn't say throw a rock. It means you could catch him and then go take out his eye. So, but also, look, I mean, we know these translations are a little, shall we say, suspect. Okay? We know that these are suspect, but it says here, you can put out the eye of someone who looks into your house. So this is not exactly a peaceful religion if you can blind someone and there is no penalty. And this is violent, this is immoral, and this is illegal.
And this is global.
Yeah, and they have to enforce it if they can. The fact that the Muslim is not doing jihad on your street doesn't mean he doesn't want to. It just means he's not able to yet, or he might be about to. You just don't know.
If it ever happened, and I pray it never will, and you got a place like Iran with a nuke, they will use it within a week.
Say that again, please.
If it ever happened that a country like Iran have a nuke, they will use it within a week.
Oh, that is frightening. That is true, because
it's currently, the country like Pakistan, they are, at least they don't have Islamic government now. The country that Muslim countries like Turkey, the reason they are not engaging in war is not because they don't want to, is because they can't.
Yeah.
They don't have the power to take on everybody. But you will see a place like Turkey, even though they can't attack Europe, which they would like to, they still want Rome. They will still attack who they consider to be non-Muslims, the Kurds, the Yazidis, and so on.
Yeah, no, they want to, obviously, yeah, and they're in NATO. I don't know how that happened, but the naivety is just off the charts.
I think it happened because the NATO didn't want them to join the Soviet Union way back when, so they got them as allies, so they don't join the Soviet. But Even if they did, they are not friend with the Soviet or with the European. They are just waiting to get the opportunity to actually wipe both of them or get both of them to submit. Let me share in case someone want to read more about this.
Yeah, just for those who are watching, we're streaming on YouTube, on Rumble, as well as on X. For those of you who have different platforms. And yeah, for those who don't know, this is the second time Ibn al-Warraq is on the channel. We plan to hopefully do more of these to discuss some of these issues, go through the history so we can see from a historical perspective. And that's something I'm very interested in, is the historical perspective, or the historical method, because that shows evidence. When we make a claim, we can show evidence that ties into all the statements that we're making. And let me just kick this.
Okay, and this is a couple of books about the North African Barbary coast piracy.
Pirate utopias, yeah. I mean, they call them Moorish. Well, why do they call them Moorish? It's Muslims. You know, it's Islamists. No, it's Muslims. You know, it's always something, but it's never Muslims.
Because there were different flavors of Muslim ethnically.
Same idea, different coat, different hat. What's the difference?
Nothing other than it's just a political, you know, when you go to Baskin Robbins, there are 31 flavor, but they are ice cream at the end.
Yeah. I mean, people say radical Islam, extremist Islam, Islamism.
I don't have a problem with the term radical Islam, because I would look at Islam as on a scale from 1 to 100. So there are some people like Bula Abdul who doesn't recognize, or Bila Hadid doesn't do anything of Islam whatsoever. But then you would have the Zawahiri and Bin Laden of the Islamic world. So it just how far into how close to the founding text of Islam, the Quran, Hadith, and Sunnah are you? So I can understand the term. I don't use it, I can understand it.
But in all these terms, radical Islam, Islamism, fundamentalist Islam, Islamic extremism, the common denominator is the word Islam.
Yeah, it's a family squabble between them at the end of the day. And, you know, personally, I actually, the people you would call moderate Muslim, for me, in European sense, they are a lot more dangerous than what you call radical. Because,
well, actually, you know what, the term radical, when you look in the dictionary, I just went to Wikipedia now, a quick one, but Latin, radix, the root. Radical just means you're returning to the source. You're going back to the way of Muhammad and his companions. Yes, radical does not mean extreme. It does not mean extreme. It doesn't mean crazy. Radical just means let's go back to the original. That's all it means.
So what I was saying, the one you would be called today in Western media, at least, moderate, I believe those are actually more dangerous, because those are the one who whitewash the radicals. It's like, no, we don't all do what Al-Qaeda and ISIS and Boko Haram does. It's the question is, you don't do it. It's not that it's not allowed. It's either you can't or you don't want to.
Different definition just came up, different than the one I had before. Google's interesting. Yeah, also they're gaslighting you. So look, I mean, you've got the people. Look, Bill Warner says a lot of things that I don't necessarily find are well formulated, but he does say these are not non-violent, they're pre-violent. So remember, you've got your spies and you've got your warriors, and on the other hand, these people act as spies, they act as PR, they act as propagandists. So they're not uninvolved, they're just not involved in, shall we say, active field operations in the sense of carrying a weapon, but they're not.
And in the recent days, even you get your TikTok blondes are whitewashing and carrying water for Islamic radicalism, because the whole idea of telling you there are extreme minority who actually believe these things. This is beside the point, because the question is that extreme minority belief supported by the founding text of Islam or not? If it
Yes, it
is,
is.
then you have to deal with the entire belief. It's like that I do believe statistically, member of the German society who were in the Third Reich were not the majority. I don't believe that's under Stalin, with the majority of Russian was in the Red Army. So that's completely, if you're playing the number game, it's completely irrelevant.
Mm-hmm. No, you only need, apparently, as from between two. In Germany, apparently the Nazis were only something like 15% at most of the population, but it was enough to take over the country. So you could take over a country potentially with as little as 2 or 3% politically.
Even smaller than that, you could cause a whole lot of damage. Pol Pot didn't have a majority of people with him to kill 1/3 of the population of his country. What was our next point? I think, unless you want to ask about that, I think that's probably cover the Barbary
Let me
piracy.
go back. I've got the notes here. Let me go back.
Sure.
And so let me just bring this up. Close that. Close that. I'll drop this in here. And of course, it decided to even better. Close this. Give me a second. Gonna open up my screen again. So here we've got a few topics that we were discussing. So the one was expansion of Islam, so historical spread, violence in Islam. Okay, here we go. Let me just bring this on the screen. There you go. Violence in Islam, moral equivalence. Now, also something you're open to this, but we didn't discuss this. But there was a stupid post by a woman called Lily J or something. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I think she's a Muslim. Heck, I don't know. Not sure. But what happens is she was saying the Bible has the word fighting or sword over 400 times. Granted, it does. The Bible is also about 5,000 times bigger than the Quran. The Quran can fit on a postage stamp. It's a tiny book. It doesn't say sword, but it certainly commands aggression. However, the Bible is much longer. It's much older. It goes back thousands of years. It discusses historically. It speaks in terms of poetry. It discusses in terms of history, and it is descriptive because it also has to go through moral lessons, and it is not prescriptive. Whereas the Quran's use of violence is prescriptive. Then we can look at the example of Jesus. How many 9-year-olds did Jesus take to bed? None, as far as we know. But pedophile, the founder of Islam, to use his Western name, pedophile, how many people did he order murdered? How many people did he personally kill? How many wives did he have?
It's actually kind of a very low resolution thinking, because for once, okay, I have the word sword in the Bible. What's the context?
Yes.
Because you can use the word sword. The pen is mightier than the sword. I'm not ordering anyone to fight. So you can use it, the sword against you, like when Israel was taken into the Babylonian captivity or the Assyrian captivity. There was a sword used, but it was used by the Assyrian or the Babylonian against Israel. It's not the other way around. So that's extremely low level thinking. The other thing is the practice of the follower of the religion. How did they understand? How the first audience understand the command of their own book? The first audience of Islam after Muhammad's death, they started the war of apostasy, where Abu Bakr murdered tens of thousands of Muslims who refused to pay him the zakah. And then they started by the second Khalifa, by Umar, they started invasion of Iraq, Persia, Byzantine Empire. So the people who received the text, they received the message, understood fully well. It doesn't say sword, but we know exactly what we're supposed to do. I can go on. Oh yeah, the Quran says, smite their necks and kill the infidels wherever you find them.
Yeah.
It's thinking to that level. The word miracle doesn't exist in the Bible, therefore there are no miracles.
No, and also, if you look at the metaphor in the Bible, you have the sword of truth, which symbolizes the power of God's word, divine truth to cut through falsehood. You've got the sword of the Spirit. You've got as the word of God. So you
and you
have
get
metaphorical
the
usage.
armor of God, which has absolutely nothing to
Correct.
do with so it's a very very low level thinking for I don't know, someone is being paid as a public relation for Islam. That's as far as I can think, because you don't deal with text on this level, any text, historical or not. It's how the first audience understand the text, how they implement it, how did they apply. I don't recall in Islamic history they said, oh, we don't have the word sword, therefore let's not fight. You know, Muhammad in enticement for others was come with us so you might conquer Rome, or you might have a booty of, you know, white women. He said Banat al-Asfar, the yellow women. I don't know what yellow women reference to geographically, but he saw them as yellow.
Yeah, let me just bring this up quickly for the audience, just to show them what you just mentioned, how it was understood. This is from the most popular seerah of Muhammad, right? This
Ibn
is
Hisham.
this is the Sirat Rasulullah by Guillaume. And it says, do you realize to what you are committing yourselves in pledging your support to this man? It is to war against all and sundry. This is the second pledge of Aqaba. Muslims often talk about the peaceful nature of the first pledge, but then the Muslims didn't have political power. But the second pledge of Aqaba says, we pledge ourselves to war against all and sundry. In other words, we are going to war against everybody. So they're stating bluntly that we have pledged ourselves. So they have come together to make war on you. So these are people that are intending to make war on everyone with no exceptions. Here it is. Let me just bring this up again. This is the second pledge. Now, the first pledge of Aqaba, Muslims will quote because it's peaceful, but it says here, these are the conditions. Let me zoom out and just capture this quickly. It will be easier for me. I'm using my indexing software. Conditions at the second pledge of Aqaba. Allah gave his apostle permission to fight, and the second pledge of Aqaba contained conditions involving war, which were not in the first pledge. They bound themselves to war against all and sundry for Allah and his apostle, and he promised them for faithful services the reward of paradise. So for death, they're going to get their huris in paradise. And we pledged ourselves to war in complete obedience to the apostle. So this is a pledge of permanent, unending warfare.
And to add to this, Muhammad himself actually, with telling them, I know the term we're not supposed to use these days because it's politically incorrect. I was made victorious by terror. You see it?
Yes,
I was
I've been helped by terror. Yes.
Yeah, so it was within the text itself. It's like, yeah, I was sent to terrorize everybody. And by the way, that's in Sahih Muslim. It's it's one of the authentic
Muslim.
Yeah, Da'if Muslim, as you call it.
Yeah. And then they're going to say, "Oh, you're misleading your audience. Why are you lying to your audience after they make a mistake?" It's like, yeah, just.
I actually can read both the translation and the Arabic, and sometimes the translation is a lot softer than the Arabic.
Yeah, no, I think we know that even the Sharia. I mean, you've got to be so careful how they've written it because it softens. Even in the Encyclopedia of Islam as well, they soften these things. They don't give a true account.
Sorry, speaking of which, because last week you had a kind of a fight with a Muslim because you used the term Sharia manual. I laughed my head off because the translator chose to put that as a title, as a textbook, but within in Arabic text, Umdat as-Salik, the Reliance of the Traveler, is one of hundreds, and they don't agree with each other. So for a Muslim who speaks only Arabic or who knows Arabic, the concept of Sharia manual doesn't exist in his head. That's why you had some people saying, "What you talking about, manual?" Because they have Sharia books where whatever you want, not that I can wrongly say it's right or wrong, but I can reach from the contradictory text the opposite conclusion of any point.
No, agreed. There are thousands of these texts, or there were, but a certain handful have become authoritative, that
Yes,
become
Umdat
used.
Salik, even in Arabic, is one of the authoritative one, but within one madhab. There's others, like you get the lighter one. If you get something like Al-Mughni ibn Qudama, which is a Hanbali madhab, it's a lot more radical than the Reliance of the Traveler.
Yeah, the
But it's not
differences are,
translated to
though.
the English.
Actually, I can bring up, you know what, I'll bring up the difference as to why that is in a moment. But the difference is in terms of strictness, azima versus rukhsa. So the
Yes.
different schools have a variation in terms of strictness. It's not, largely speaking, they're identical, but the difference is how strictly they apply something. So I'll get to that in a moment.
Okay, we've been about an hour and a bit. So
I can
would
go a little bit more. There was some questions that we had from last week.
ask
I'd
away.
like to bring up, but let me just get to.
I remember something where you asked me that's why is it that Allah is not the God of the Bible?
Yeah, I'll get to those questions in a moment. Let me just finish this, and I'll bring up the rest of the
Yes.
questions. These are questions from our last talk that people asked, topics that people seem to really resonate with, and I wanted to just discuss those for the next little while, and then we'll call it a day. This
Okay.
is so the Sharia has 6 pillars. There are 6 pillars of the Sharia, and 2 of them, 1
It's
and 4.
5+1.
Yeah, so this is of the Sharia, so not the pillars of Islam, the pillars of the Sharia. So
And the
aims
pillars of
more.
Islam as well, they are 5+1.
Yeah, jihad, correct, the
Yeah.
unspoken one. So in the Sharia, aims are more important than means. So in other words, how you do it isn't important. As long as you are doing it for Allah, you can do literally anything. There is no moral restriction. So understand that any means necessary is allowed. And notice the fourth one, necessities permit the forbidden. So do you have any comment on this before I move on?
Two things. One, the first one, there is an actual historical event where someone was accused for lying about the Prophet by fabricating hadith. And his defense for himself, I didn't lie about him, I lied for him. I was
Wow.
fabricating hadith to make him look better. The other one, الضرورات تبيح المحظورات. There are several fatwa, if you say, came recently, where I'm still not sure they are actually true or not, where one of them is the most bizarre I've ever read. Someone says they discovered a suicide bombing, they discovered a way where they can use explosive to put in someone's backside. So the fatwa was asking, can I allow the other mujahideen to widen it up for me? And the sheikh said, yes, you can, because you're doing it for jihad and ad-darurat, the ad-darurat tubih al-mahzurat. So I'm still, I've read it in an Egyptian newspaper, I've read it in a Saudi newspaper, I saw it in TV, and I'm still not sure that's actually a genuine question or someone was making fun of
That is
terrorists.
disturbing.
Because I don't know, they called it jihad al-wat, homosexuality jihad. So apparently somebody think that's you can do that.
Look, again, I mean, aims are more important than means, and necessities permit the forbidden. This means there is no moral restraint, nothing. And thank you very much. Thank you, Cargo Crew. That was very kind of you. Thank you. So this is from Shar'ani. He's a very important scholar in Islam, someone you've never heard of. He wrote a book called the Mizan al-Kubra because you had these 4 schools. There were numerous schools. They settled on 4. There's one within the Jafari school in Shia that they also recognize, that the Sunnis actually recognize.
Pronunciation of the name, it's Sha'arani.
Sha'arani. Okay, yeah. Sha'arani. So he wrote what's called the Great Balance, or the Supreme Scales. And he came up with the doctrine of ikhtilaf, or difference, because there were differences between the four schools. Now, they do agree on 80%, 85% of doctrine. So the difference is, let's say, if you apostatize, you leave Islam, they all agree you die. How you die, that's the difference, okay? When you die, and so on. So now he basically reconciled the differences in the fiqh. And what he said was that effectively the four schools are a single school. Now Muslims will try and dispute this to try to say, well, we don't belong to that school and blah, blah, whatever. You know, they'll lie. So they're treated as one school, but their differences are according to how difficult it is to abide by a ruling. So if a ruling is too difficult for you, too strict, then you can choose a different one which is easier for you. So they speak of strictness, azima, or dispensation, relaxation, rukhsa, and that's the difference between these four schools. So he died in 1565. So the Sharia took roughly 900 years to develop and finalize, only being finalized in the 1500s, maybe early 1600s. Just thought I'd point that out.
Yeah, and the problem they committed in the 1500 or around that time, some Muslims, Sunni scholar says that's the way of ijtihad is closed. So no one can interpret the text today for the needs of the time. They have to stick to what the scholar said 500, 600, 700 years ago.
Correct. Correct.
So whatever,
yeah, we can discuss that in the. Yeah, sorry, go on.
Whatever is new event now, you have to actually find a parallel to it in the old text. You cannot actually interpret anything based on current event or current need.
Right. So, was there any relevance to Robert of Ketten's? This is a different discussion, maybe something we can pick up later, but there was an early Quran translation by Robert of Ketten in Latin, and then there were these Quran translations done by Christians, and people were curious.
Quran wasn't translated by Muslim for none. It was translated into Sindhi and Persian in the 10th century, but for Muslims. It was not translated into non-Muslim language until the 20th century. Because one, they considered the Quran is to be the uncreated word of Allah, therefore it cannot be translated. So you never find a book, a translation by a Muslim written in it, a translation of the Quran, ever. It's always the translation of the meaning of the Quran. Because but Muslim, until today, they have not translated the Quran well. They say, this is a Quran translation. They haven't done that. And the reason why they were forced to translate, that's where the one were done by Peter the Venerable, I believe. The reason they were forced to translate it into non-Muslim majority language is because they were Christian monks and linguists and Orientalists already translated the Quran linguistically.
Yeah, there were French translations as early as the 1600s, at least, that I know of, and that was based off Persian.
Done by non-Muslim. The first translation was done by a Muslim, was by Maulana Muhammad Ali in India and in English, and he was an Ahmadi, so he's not considered to be Muslim by Muslims.
Right, but then again, Shia aren't Muslims according to Sunni and vice versa. So
Ahmadi, not Muslims. The only country in the Middle East where you can find Ahmadi is Israel. They do not exist in any Islamic country.
Isn't that strange?
Yeah.
And then also you spoke of why Allah is definitely not Yahweh, right? Because their natures diverge, their morals diverge, the logic as to how they think and operate. You spoke about this, and you mentioned that. Just maybe briefly
take one thing very, very quickly. There is something in the Bible, in both in the Old and the New Testament. It's impossible for God to lie.
Yes, he's good.
Okay.
He's only good. He can only do good.
As a doctrine, you'll find it in Numbers 23:19. You'll find it in Roman. You'll find it in First Samuel, and that's why you find in it says when God gave a promise to Abraham, he swore by himself because there's none greater, and he doesn't lie. And it used to be a question in the Middle Ages to ask a theological question is something like that. Can God send David to hell? And the answer for the theological answer is absolutely not. Why? Because he promised, and God cannot lie, then he cannot take his word back. Take that within Islam. There is a verse in the Quran says if Allah wants to send Jesus and his mother to hell, he can do that. So he is not bound by his character. He does not have a character. In Islam, there is a doctrine. They discuss it. They debated with each other. It's the Allah's ability to lie, not that he actually lie. Can he? Within a Jewish and
deny that
Christian
Allah can do
theology,
something is blasphemy. So therefore, Allah can do anything, and in fact, nothing is
yeah,
greater than Allah. So Allah is a greater liar and a greater evildoer than
but
Satan.
that creates a problem, because within the biblical text, there are certain things God cannot do.
Right.
He cannot deny himself. He cannot die. It's impossible for God to lie. So there are certain things his omniscient will forbid him his character, forbid him. He's bound by who he is. There is absolutely no possibility when God says, oh, by the way, guys, I give a covenant with you, but I changed my mind. That's not going to happen. That's why within, between Christian and Jews, we absolutely agree 100% about the text. We disagree about what it means. We have different interpretation for it, but we don't argue over did he say that or not. Okay. Within Islam, it's like, oh no, I don't think he said that. You guys did change it. So that's one. So he's not bound by his character. Abu Bakr, the first caliph, he said, if I have one of my feet in heaven and the other one outside it, I would not guarantee Allah's deception.
Yes.
Even though he is being promised to go to heaven, he still, because the concept of omniscient Islam, Allah is not bound by anything. He can change his mind. Even if he doesn't, he can. Or you take, that there are a certain number of Muhammad's companions who were promised to go to heaven. 10 of them. But at the same time, Muhammad said, if two Muslims fought each other, the killer and the one who was killed, both of them are in hell. That creates a problem, because the 10 who were promised to go to heaven fought each other right after he died. So if they are promised to go to heaven, but Muhammad said they're going to go to hell, which one is it? Because Allah is not bound by his character. This is one.
This creates logical inconsistencies. Yeah.
Yes. The second thing is because of the doctrine of we talked about last time, the doctrine of transcendence and the doctrine of dissimilarity. He's ultimately unknown being. Like within the Christian and Jewish scripture, when you talk about God's character, it's different from us qualitatively and quantitatively.
Yeah, we are made in his image, and it's not just in physical image, but it's really also in terms of morals and logic.
Like when you say his love is categorical. It's the standard of love. And it's infinitely different from but it's not a different kind. It means the same thing. It means I love you. It means I'm doing good for you without expecting you to do anything in return, like parents' love, for example. So it's not different in kind. It's a different quality and quantity.
In degree.
In Islam, it's something else. Whatever comes to your mind, Allah something else.
Yeah, which is very convenient.
The other thing is, which again put him in she in a completely different category. Quite often I get from a Muslim, he says, okay, you guys don't have an inherent or an authentic text, which is very interesting point, because the presupposition is we need an infallible text from God. Okay, why? For Christian and for Jews, you need an infallible text because it's a reminder of God's promises and it's a testimony against the people. When we do something wrong, the text is, we cannot, if anybody come with a new revelation, it has to be judged by the old. But it's not the case in Islam. In Islam, if you have the autograph of Moses, Isaiah, Jesus, anybody, the new revelation can say, oh, but it's abrogated. So the concept of infallible revelation is absolutely nonsensical, because Allah can abrogate not just a command, he can abrogate historical event.
Crazy.
So whatever happens, he might decide that that's not the case. So there is something in language called indexing. Like I know several people might be called Lloyd. Which one I'm talking about? I give you a description of the character of the person. If I'm said Martin Luther, which Martin Luther I'm talking about? If I says he was a Roman Catholic monk, lived in the 16th century, an American civil rights activist, you know how I know. So when you use, even in Arabic, you use the word Allah to describe the God of the Bible and the God of the Quran. What's the content? Oh, well, one is covenantal God who have a covenant with his people and he never renege in his promises. And the other is the one who decide what's going to be based on what he feels like today. And there is nothing to bound him. So these two characters those two words don't indicate the same character.
Let me end here because we need to wrap up
Okay.
shortly. So I just want to mention to audience that, look, Islam, I wrote this earlier, but Islam presents itself as a continuation of Christianity. It borrows figures from Christianity, like Jesus and Mary, Abraham and others, but it hijacks them. So it mimics Christianity, but it openly opposes and denies it. For instance, it denies that Jesus was the Son of God or the Messiah. It uses the word not in the same way. He's merely a prophet. He preceded and announced the coming of Muhammad. So Mary's a virgin, but it nullifies Jesus' divinity, his crucifixion, and replaces the gospel's salvation with submission to Muhammad. Right? And Muhammad is merely a man, so therefore Muhammad brought man-made law. But of course, it's not the law of Allah. Right? And of course, if you go into the Sirah, they embellish him into a divine figure. Muhammad becomes a deity in the Sirah. So you've got a simulacrum of Christianity. You have a false mirror. We know that Allah is different because
can I finish? Sorry, carry on.
Second, the morals of Islam contradict Christianity's completely. And also, God is logos, God is logic. Logic is non-contradictory. Allah can contradict himself, God cannot. So therefore, we also know on that basis of logic that these are not the same gods. Yes?
Two things. One, the moral of Islam contradict Islam. It depends on the time frame. So there are certain things allowed and not allowed, and so on. The second, there is an observation about the biblical character in the Quran. You will find during Muhammad's time, both Christianity and Judaism was oral tradition. People didn't walk around with Bibles. There were no print house at the time. So it's the story that's repeated every day. Like, find the most common story from the Bible and the Quran is the story of Moses and the Exodus. Because in Jewish tradition, when you tell the story to the kids remember when we were slaves in the land of Egypt and God freed out of slavery. So that story is repeated at almost every festival. You'll find those stories in the Quran, but not complete. The biblical character that don't come in the oral story a lot, you'll find them completely absent from the Quran. And some of them where you don't, yes, last sentence, some of them where you don't have much about their life in the Bible, you would have nothing about them in the Quran, like Enoch, which is Idris in the Quran. And Idris was a prophet and we lifted him up high, and that's it.
But in the scholarly text, Idris becomes Thoth, that's the moon god of Egypt.
And then you have because it's oral tradition, you have a lot of the things in the Quran is taken from both Jewish oral tradition and Christian apocrypha, and that's non-authentic whatsoever. And we can carry on another time.
So
thank you for having me.
1 second. So guys, to end off, basically, Islam hijacks Christianity and it mimics Christianity for the purposes of destroying it. Remember, Allah hates the non-Muslim. Muslims have to thus hate you too. So we need to understand these differences. We need to understand their texts, and yeah, we need to start changing the narrative. So yeah, that's it for tonight. We'll carry on again in the near future. So thanks, guys. God bless. And I'll be online with Adam Seeker in about 35 minutes, but let me go and get something to eat. And I'll see you guys soon. And thank you, Ibn Warraq. Really great to have you
Thank
on
you.
again. Take care,
Have a
guys.
good
Good night. God
evening.
bless.
Bye.